Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to be sitting here recording right now. I actually love recording so much. I love recording these podcast episodes. And I don't get to do it enough at the moment, but I really, really love it when I'm sat here. Oh my god. And audio upgrade. Hello. If you're listening on audio only, you're welcome. About damn time. But yeah, I really, really love recording. This feels so nice as a means of creative expression and stuff. And like, this isn't what the episode is going to be about. I'll get into it in a second. But I like that I now have the book discussion format for the show because it took a lot of the guesswork out of it, because it was like, before I'd have to think like, oh my god, what can I make an episode about this time? I was trying to put them out regularly, and then that wasn't happening with my schedule and stuff, but also because I couldn't think of ideas, and I felt like I had to increasingly come up with new cool ideas. One of my favorite episodes that I've done so far is especially before I started doing the book episodes, was the one on self-care. I really liked that one. I was like, oh, I really did something here. My brain really cooked. But following that with every episode becomes a challenge. So yeah, that's why I've struggled to put out episodes, and that's why I was like, okay, cool, the book format is good, it works for me, it gives me something to focus on. The problem is reading books takes a really long time, so I can't put them out as often as I want to, and then I can't actually use podcasting like this as the means of creative self-expression that I find it. And yeah, I just really enjoy it. I really find this fun. So it's then a bit difficult to rein it in, because like, oh, we need to wait until I finish the book and I can make notes on it and whatever. But I collated enough ideas to talk about today, and I think they'll flow together nicely, or at least I hope so. So it should work as more of a traditional podcast episode, maybe a bit more old school. But I'm just really excited. I'm sat here. If you're watching the video version of this podcast on YouTube and also on Substack, I'm sat here in this new Uniqlo fleece. I've been thinking about these fleeces for a couple of years, and I didn't get one because I was like, I don't know how it fits into my style and stuff, but my style has been really undergoing a shift recently in like the last 6 months. And I was wearing my husband's fleece when we were walking our dog the other day, and I was like, you know what, fuck it, I want a fleece. And so I found this beautiful chocolate brown colour. Really love it. I've been wearing it all day, very cozy, even though I bought it to be like a jacket I wear at the house for dog walks. I've just been wearing it in the house all day. I'm so cozy. I've got a blanket on my lap. I am ready and prepped to do this. The only thing that would make this better is a matcha, but okay, the radiator starts making a weird noise, but it's fine. Yes, the only thing that would make this better is matcha. But the problem with making matcha is that, like, the biggest mugs, I mean, unless I put it in the really, like, fuck off huge mug, but I like putting it in the cute glass mugs. But the glass mugs are 300ml. And 300ml just doesn't feel like enough matcha. Because by the time I start, I'm done drinking it. So what's the point? And especially if I'd made it before coming up to film, I would have just finished the thing by the time I started filming. So what's the answer? I guess I need to get bigger glasses. But yes, hello, hi. Also, yes, the audio is great. I have finally figured out how to make this mic work with my phone. If you've seen the vlog that I posted last July, I was trying desperately to make the mic work on that day. I bought the mic. This is a DJI mic mini. I bought it specifically for that day because I knew I was going to be vlogging, and I was hoping that like if I had a mic, I could afford, like I'd be able to talk a bit softer in public and it would still pick up the audio fine. And then it didn't freaking work. And now I've finally figured out what the problem was. And the problem was so simple. It was such a simple fix, as it like typically is. But it works now. And I've got a handle. I was really looking forward to getting a mic back. I mean, I do have a proper wide mic, which I still need to figure out how to make work with equipment and stuff. That's an equipment issue for another day. But I appreciate right now having this case for the little mic mini because it's nice to be on camera, because obviously, even if you're listening to audio only, this is also a visual video podcast, like I said, on YouTube and Substack. So it's nice to have something to be able to hold rather than just let my hands like free float. I guess that's why people hold drinks like matchas or whatever, but I just really like holding the mic. I've gotten comfortable with that, which, like, this isn't my first podcast. My first podcast is OMG Spill, and I mentioned it before. I've also interviewed Kirtana, my wonderful, amazing co-host, on this podcast before. And I remember there was one episode of OMG Spill where we were like, okay, video podcasts are kind of taking off now. Shall we try it and do the thing? And so for that one, I held the mic, and oh my god, that was so stressful that whole time. I was so aware that I was holding the mic, and I felt really stiff and like I couldn't move and stuff. Whereas now I feel so like loosey-goosey. It feels great. It feels great to be more comfortable on camera and when recording. I love it. Life is great right now. Good vibes. Okay, so getting into the episode. Yes, this episode is going to be a bit twisty-turny. I hope we'll get there in the end. But I'm going to start by talking about India and cultural lag. So this started when, I think this was back in December, Lara Raj and her sister were like spotted in Chennai wearing miniskirts or something, or like they posted pictures on Instagram. I don't know. I heard about it secondhand on TikTok, and people were talking about the concept of cultural lag and how it's like, when you go back to, I don't know if it happens with anyone other than Indians actually, because I've only ever heard Indians talk about cultural lag, or like foreign-born Indians but of Indian descent will talk about cultural lag when they go back to India or when it comes to their parents or whatever. I've not heard other groups talk about this. Is this a thing? But as far as Indians go, yes, so this creator on TikTok, I'm pretty sure I have it saved, so I can leave it linked in the show notes. Yes, I will try. It was talking about cultural lag in terms of, Lara Raj wearing this miniskirt in Chennai, and how there was there's a bit of dust flying in front of me. Also, the comedian Veer Das did a stand-up set recently where he was like, if you want to raise awkward virgins, raise them in New Jersey or not New Delhi or something like that. And yeah, there's this thing, right, when you're part of the diaspora, you don't realize, or like people tend not to realize, that India has moved past the point where you think it is. And basically, when people leave India, if they moved in like the 70s, when they move somewhere, they retain the mindset of India in the 70s and they don't update it. If they moved in the 90s, they retain the mindset of India in the 90s, but they don't update it in time with the people who are still living in India and who are developing new thoughts. I don't want to say progressive or like modernizing, because I think those are very loaded terms and whatever, but I'm just going to say they're updating their thoughts. Their thoughts are changing, right? What is acceptable in society and whatnot. But people don't keep pace with that. Once they leave the country, they just kind of stay stuck in that mentality. And this is something that, in my family, we've spoken about this before, even before I knew the term cultural lag. Sorry, I'm talking really fast because I'm so excited that now I'm kind of out of breath. Let me slow down. Where was I? Oh, yes. So people move with, and like they retain the mindset that they had when they moved. And I wanted to add another layer to this, because I'm someone where I basically went to India every year, almost every year as a kid. It was something that my parents prioritized, especially because like family and seeing elderly family members, like grandparents and stuff. So they really made sure that my siblings and I went almost every single year. But I feel like I've kind of suffered from this kind of idea of cultural lag, even though I've been going to India. And my parents, like I said, we've talked about this amongst ourselves, and they're very much aware of the concept of cultural lag, and they kind of critique it in the people that they know. And they're like, this person is working with this attitude, but it's not India in the decade that they moved, and like we live in London in the 2020s, whatever it is. So this thing doesn't work. You can't keep applying it. That's the kind of attitude my parents are coming at it from. So it's not like I was particularly exposed to cultural lag in that respect at home. Sure, from other people, yes, but I didn't grow up with it in the same way, if you know what I mean. But I do still feel like I have suffered from this idea of cultural lag, even though I've been to India so many times as well. And we used to go for like weeks at a time, like during the summer holidays and stuff, right? So it's not like I didn't spend any time there. But I feel like part of the problem comes when you go and you stay with your grandparents. Because like my grandparents live in modern India, but they're obviously, like, ultimately they're still of that generation. So they still have some of those mindsets and stuff. Like when it comes to what is acceptable to wear in public, my grandparents were always very, like, as soon as I started becoming a teenager, they started clamping down on what I was wearing because they were like, it's not safe. And there were a couple of occasions that happened while I was with them where I didn't realize it at the time, but I look back on it now and I'm like, yeah, that wasn't safe. So I definitely understand why they were freaking out, because it happened right in front of them. And it could have been very dangerous for me if they weren't more paranoid, basically. So then it was quite a shock for me to meet Kirtana and to be hanging out in Bangalore with her. And this was like the first Indian person I knew that I wasn't at all related to. So like Indian young person that I wasn't related to. And the vibe was just really different. It was really like, what is the right word? It's not off-putting. It was just it really caught me off guard when I would talk to her about things and she would be like, you know, that's fine. Like, it's not that deep. Like showing bra straps, like my grandparents are very particular about stuff like showing bra straps. Again, is their age, their paranoia. I mean, like, their paranoia is not unjustified. So I guess it doesn't count as paranoia. But when I talked to Kirsten about it, she was like, yeah, it's fine. Like, what are you talking about? And that was the first time I feel like I fully was confronted with the concept, because again, it was someone that was young and that I wasn't related to, and there was no one around me that I was related to because it was my friend. So even with like my younger, like my cousins and stuff who are kind of like in my age range, it's not the same, because then we'd always be around family, we'd be around their parents and stuff, or my aunts and uncles. So ultimately they would still have like guidelines they would need to follow the majority of the time, because their parents would be able to see what they were doing. Whereas here that wasn't the case. So I was able to actually like see things myself for the first time. I mean, I think it definitely does make a difference where you are in India. And not all, like, between rural and urban, sure, but even like within urban, like, well, cities are different. You're not going to get the same response in various cities. But that was my experience of like understanding cultural lag properly in that respect. I think another way it showed up for me was when I finally learned swear words in Indian languages. Like, I mean, mainly Hindi, but I learned swear words because before that, it was like, who was I speaking Hindi with? My grandparents. Where the hell was I going to learn swear words from my grandparents? But I thought the idea of cultural lag was also interesting in terms of feminist leanings, because I feel like unless you go to India and talk to people in those spaces or engage with very specific things on the internet, which is effectively like engaging in those spaces with those people just from wherever in the world, it can be easy to miss that kind of thing. Like, it's not the overwhelmingly dominant narrative within Indian society, Indian society online, like, at least from what I've seen on social media and stuff. And yet I've had some very interesting conversations with various older women in the last month that really got me thinking. I've had 3 different conversations with women who were talking about when they were younger, how they wanted to do things differently than was the norm for them. One of them didn't want to get married. She didn't want to get married and have kids. She ended up getting married at the age of 30 because she was being pressured so much, but she wanted to stay single, stay free, living her life, being fabulous, traveling around the world. That was the thing that she loved doing. Another one was telling me that you know, once she was married and she had kids and stuff, she just she didn't really care. I mean, well, she did care. She didn't want her firstborn to be a daughter, because she was like, whenever I've observed eldest daughters, also I'm an eldest daughter right here, but whenever I've observed eldest daughters, like they always end up getting parentified, basically. And she didn't use those words, but that's what she was saying. And so she was like, the only thing I cared about was not having a daughter for that reason, because I didn't want her to end up being parentified just by like default, like virtue of being the oldest. And this was from someone I didn't expect it from, so I was really like quite a bit touched, moved by the fact that she was saying this. And it was like, oh, you had these thoughts when you were going to have kids and you were newly married and you were young. And it's so different from the person that I see you as now. And those examples are still like within my parents' generation. Even if you want to go to my grandparents' generation, I was having a conversation with an older lady who was talking about how at the time of her wedding, it was traditional in Hindu ceremonies in like this particular part of India at that time for the bride to cover her face with her chunni or dupatta. And she was saying, yeah, I didn't because I asked her, why didn't you? And she was like, I just didn't feel like it. And it ended up causing a big scandal in the village at that time. And I was like, wow. Again, not someone I would expect this kind of behavior from now, or I'd anticipated from now. But for you to have done that back then, when you were young, is really cool. And it just gets me thinking, well, like, isn't it interesting how no matter how these women have turned out as they've gotten older, whether they're whether they're seniors or whether they're middle-aged or what, even though they might come across more conservative now, at one point they did have dreams and they did want things and they wanted to do things differently. They wanted to do things their way. And I'm just like, where along the way did you lose that? And did you start giving in to society? And when society told you to do this thing, you were like, yeah, okay, cool. And you stopped questioning it and thinking about what you wanted for yourself. At what point does that shift happen? And obviously it doesn't happen to everyone, but it happens to more people than it doesn't happen to. So when is that? Why is that? It just is one of those moments where you're like, oh, she was just a girl. She was just a girl who didn't want to cover her face on her wedding day. She was just a girl who wanted to protect her child. She was just a girl who wanted to see the world and be young and free. And at least in 2 of those cases, 2 out of 3 of the cases I just talked about, those women ended up moving here from India. And I would describe them as having a level of cultural lag and adhering to the things that were relevant when they moved and aren't necessarily relevant anymore. And it's like, okay, but when did that happen? Because at the time, you were ahead of the curve. But now you're perfectly situated within that time period that you moved. I don't know. I think it's abstract. I think I'm struggling to articulate it. But it does make me think, and it does make me feel like, I don't know, it's difficult when, ultimately it's difficult as a woman when women are your opponents, because we shouldn't be opponents. We shouldn't be beefing between ourselves. The problem is not within us. And yet, somehow along the way, some people decided to uphold one set of ideals and traditions, and another set of people decided to uphold their own ideas and maybe deviate from those traditions or not, or whatever. But we separate into groups. At what point does that happen? Why does that happen? Why are we fighting ourselves? Ultimately, we're not the ones benefiting from this, but we're facilitating an environment where other people can benefit instead. I am talking about patriarchal systems and society, but this leads nicely into an exercise I did earlier this week, which was Susie Welch's Values Bridge quiz thing. Susie Welch is a business professor, I believe, at NYU, and she has this quiz where you can you basically answer, like, in an ideal world, what would your life look like? And then what does your life look like now? And it kind of totals up ultimately your values. It has 16 values, and then it ranks them in order of importance to you. And then also assigns them each numbers, where it's like, how much are you actually aligned with that value? How much are you actually living up to that value? So it's quite interesting. I did it earlier this week because I was like, I had an inkling about some values like not being my top priority. But I was like, you know what, let's just do this and get some clarity on it. And the quiz does say, or like I've heard from people, that the point isn't that these are your values like for the rest of your life. It's like the point is they are supposed to change, or like if you did this in like 5-10 years, whatever, how your values would be different and reflective of you in that point, which I do appreciate, because a lot of these things, like, it doesn't necessarily make sense to me that they're supposed to be like a one and done, that you stay the same person at 16 as you're going to be at 66, but I digress. So anyway, I did the values bridge, and my top most important value was agency, which I was like, first of all, yeah, checks out. But I thought it was quite funny when I was reading about it. But the point of agency is to be like, you value having high agency in your life. You value being independent, being able to make decisions for yourself, not being tied to things, and like, yeah, cool. I thought it was funny as I was reading it, because the thing is, it really reminded me of Eloise's arc in this season of Bridgerton, talking about season 4. At least the first half of it, because like the second half hasn't come out at the time of recording this. But yeah, I really liked her arc in this season of Bridgerton. I liked that Hyacinth actually called her out on her meanness and her just how depressing she was being. Hyacinth was absolutely right. She was trying to find points of connection with her big sister, like by talking about the ballet book, for example. And what did Eloise do? She just like sighed and denigrated it and belittled Hyacinth. But then she was happy to talk about books with Sophie, even though Sophie also commented on that same ballet book. But yeah, Eloise absolutely needed just because my dreams aren't like yours doesn't mean that unimportant moment, like that scene from Little Women. And it's like, you can desire agency. That doesn't mean you have to be a bitch about it and shit on everyone else. I also saw this really great TikTok, which I will again link in the show notes, where this creator was saying that Eloise says she wants to be a spinster, but actually she doesn't have the spinster mindset. She just doesn't want to be annoyed by people. And I was like, that is so true. True words have never been spoken. What a great way to put it. Eloise says she wants to be a spinster. I mean, this creator also went on to say, like, she doesn't have any skills. Right, because when Kate said she wanted to be a spinster in season 2, Kate was like, I'll become a governess. It's fine, I'll do something. And she had already proven her chops as a governess by how she had tutored Edwina to the point where she entered, the Ton, London society. In her first season, she was declared the diamond of the season because she just did everything absolutely perfectly. And she did everything so perfectly that became the hurdle she needed to overcome to not be perfect and be able to live her own life and stuff in her season. Kate did that. Kate raised that baby girl, and she did that. What has Eloise done? Eloise has the opportunity to do that with Hyacinth or like fucking anyone, but she doesn't do anything. Like, she just likes to complain. She just likes to be rich and complain. And we did also see this in season 2 in her interactions with Theo. Like, the class things did get in the way. And I don't even mean in how they stopped talking to each other, because that was also influenced by Penelope telling her to stop. But just in general in their interactions, like the class barriers got in the way because Eloise wasn't prepared to like overcome it. I mean, in the same way that, like, for example, Benedict will. You know, the season has not come out, but come on, we all know it's going to be a happy ending, right? And this is actually the first season where I've read the book before the season has come out, but I'm not giving any spoilers, you didn't already know. But yes, Eloise isn't prepared to do stuff like that, and she just says she wants to be a spinster because she doesn't want to deal with people, and then what? She's just going to end up like being at Anthony's mercy. Like, ultimately she's always going to be at a man's mercy, right? I'm not saying that marriage is better than like being with her very considerate older brother, but yeah, the creator just makes an excellent point. I will leave the TikTok and the show notes. But yes, Eloise just complains and wants to be a spinster just because she doesn't want to deal with society, she doesn't want to deal with marriage and stuff, and not because she actually wants to be a spinster and has a spinster mindset, as this person put it. I do think there is an element of, like, in these discussions about Eloise and her feminism and her wanting to be a spinster, there was that one conversation she had with Daphne where she was talking about how terrifying it was when Violet gave birth to Hyacinth, and then we see that in season 2 when she was breech, and it was a really scary situation. And I do think that, like, Eloise's fears aren't unfounded, and her fears about, like, losing herself, like, ultimately she makes a lot of points. Like, in season 1 she also talks about wanting to attend university, and she can't do that because she's a lady. As someone who is more academically inclined, I do sympathize. I can't imagine not being able to attend university and push this and being able to channel my brain in the way I want to channel it, rather than being forced to channel it into specific avenues. But at the same time, and I feel like these things get missed because they were such throwaway small comments. They get missed in the broader, like, we've got 3.5 seasons to go by right now. Like, a couple of moments from season 1 in the context of 3.5 seasons worth. It's understandable how these things get missed, and also, like, how much are we going to go by what Eloise said in season 1 when she is now matured and she's had her own storylines and like, character development. That's the thing. So how much are we actually going to go by these, like, one-off things she said? Again, I don't think they're unfounded, but I do think that she's also kind of a bitch. She does kind of give not like other girls, especially in season 1, actually, when she's talking to Daphne. And it made me think of this Reddit post I'd seen a while ago about choice feminism in Bridgerton, or other feminism. Is Daphne more the feminist, or is Eloise more the feminist? And the overwhelming argument in the post was that ultimately Daphne is a choice feminist. Going by the posts, choice feminism is like, women should have the choice to do what they want, basically. So if Daphne's choice is that she wants to be married and have a family and all that, then she should be able to do that. If Eloise's choice is that she doesn't want to do that, then she should be able to do that. Whereas the post was arguing that Eloise was more radical feminism, the feminism that was needed in the time. Because as much as Daphne was like, this is my choice, to have a family, to have kids, this is what I want, it was still very much a thing. Like, she was following a path that was understood by the ton, by society. Her doing that is not unconventional. It's kind of, and then you see that with Eloise when she tries to do something, everyone keeps trying to steer her back to this path, like, no, you stay here. So as much as Daphne was like, yes, this is my choice, it's also, I don't want to take away from her and say it's not her choice, but, like, it was still the path that everyone was going to push her to regardless. Whereas Eloise's thing is a lot more like I said, radical, and being like, no, I want to open up the other paths. I want to be able to travel like Polin. I want to be able to go to university if I want to. Like, I want to be able to have more choices than marrying well or becoming a spinster. Because those aren't really choices. Especially with how much, like, how disrespected, like, not respected, rather, spinsters are. Like, it doesn't really feel like a choice. At least not one that anyone is encouraged to make. Ultimately, I think it's very easy to end up going back and forth a lot. I guess I will say that while I understand the argument that, like, Daphne is a choice feminist in that respect, and Eloise is the feminist needed for her era, Eloise is also, like, what is feminism without class consciousness? Because ultimately that's what it all comes back to, right? And Eloise doesn't have that yet. I hope she develops it. But right now she doesn't have it, and it makes her critiques and arguments lacking, because she can sit around reading Wollstonecraft and doing all this stuff, making fun of Hyacinth, because she's rich and because her family's rich and they're privileged, the aristocracy. Whereas Daphne has been shown to try with people who are not from her social class. She does try. She tries to be a good duchess, but that's besides the point. But she does try with, like, Marina, for example. She sympathizes and she just tried to do something, whereas, like, Eloise is all talk She doesn't really try, and I'm trying to think of any examples where she's like actively tried to help someone. I don't think. I mean, she tried to help Cressida in the last season, but then as soon as, you know, she made up with Penelope and Cressida claimed to be whistled down, that all went to shit. So it's not like Eloise was a great friend to her either. But at least like Daphne did something for Marina. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions on this in the comments. You should be able to leave comments on whatever platform you're listening to this on. Hello, Editing Sarika here. I just wanted to add a couple of points to this section. First of all, I talked about Kate. I thought I'd just quickly touch on Penelope and Sophie as well, because Penelope also expected to be a spinster, and Sophie also expects to be a spinster. Sophie I can't really touch on, talk about too much, because like the season isn't over yet at the time of recording this. But I think like suffice to say, she pretty much just thought she'd be a spinster because she'd be a maid and she'd be working and stuff, right? Whereas Penelope like expects to be a spinster. But Penelope also actually has money, which we find out in this season. Like, she's actually made money as Lady Whistledown. She's actually done something. So again, she's got skills. She's used them. She can actually like afford to be a spinster. So yes, Eloise doesn't have the spinster mindset. Kate had the spinster mindset. Penelope had the spinster mindset. I would argue that Sophie has a spinster mindset as well. But I don't know what Eloise is doing. Secondly, after I recorded that segment, I was thinking about it, and I realized that this thing about having a choice and like having a family and stuff, I mean, it's a good analog for it is thinking about beauty in the modern day and age, like in this world, specifically when it comes to makeup, because like to wear makeup or not is a choice. No one's forcing you to wear makeup. I mean, I'm not talking about specific jobs where it's like they do mandate that you wear makeup or whatever it is in the dress code. On the whole, no one is forcing you to wear makeup to work. And yet, there are definitely certain benefits that you get from wearing makeup. And makeup effectively acts like this paywall where you have to, like literally a paywall where you have to pay the money, but then also you have to invest the time and develop the skills to be able to do it properly, to be able to access these benefits, like higher pay, being seen as more trustworthy, being seen as more competent, like all these sorts of things that are well documented. There are stats to show these things. So it's not as simple as saying like, oh, but you have the choice to wear makeup or not wear makeup. Like, I don't think it really is a choice in nearly the same way. If you want these benefits that men don't need to wear makeup to access, like they roll out of bed, some of them barely brush their hair, and they get to do these things for free. And a lot of people like to use the argument that like makeup is artistic expression. How many of you are actually using makeup as artistic expression, especially in the kind of makeup that we're talking about for the workspace and to be able to access all these benefits and stuff? You're not doing anything for artistic expression then. And I think too many people also like fall back on this argument of artistic expression when, like, babe, we all know you're doing this to, like, you're doing beautifying makeup. That is effectively the style that you're doing. It's not an artistic creative style, it's a beautifying style. We all know why you're doing this. Yes, makeup can be a form of artistic expression, but is it being used like that at this moment in time? Not necessarily. Most of the time, no. So I'm not denying it, like the power it has as a form of artistry and stuff. I think it's incredible. I love watching makeup tutorials. I got sucked into YouTube because I started watching makeup tutorials. I think the artistry involved in it is incredible. It can be incredible. And even the artistry involved in like doing a face to go to work. But like when you're doing that, you're not thinking about the artistry involved. You're just thinking about like, oh, I need to make sure that like John from accounting doesn't ask why I'm so tired, and then my manager doesn't hear about it and not put me forward for a promotion. I mean, hell, forget workplaces. I do it in these podcast episodes. In the main segment, I wear makeup, and I've made it kind of a rule for myself that if I come on camera for the main segments, I'm wearing makeup because I know the game. I was watching a video, I will see if I can track it down and leave it linked in the show notes. But someone was talking about science communicators, like female science communicators on YouTube. Out of like 150, I think it was. It was between like 100 and 200 science communicators on YouTube, I think. maybe like 250 max, but you know, this number, only like 6 of them were women. And they all wore, I think it was Lab Muffin Beauty. I will leave it linked in the show notes regardless. She was talking about how there are only like 6 of them are women, and all the women wear makeup in their videos. The men just get to rock up. They just get to turn on the cameras and start recording. Maybe they've been bullied into using like moisturizer before they get on camera, but that's it. Putting on moisturizer isn't nearly the same amount of investment as putting on a face of makeup. Anyway, all this to say is that, like, yes, I think makeup and beauty are the closest analogues we have to this particular kind of choice feminism that we're talking about in the context of Daphne. But also, when it comes to Daphne, I'm just looking at my notes here, like, she does explicitly mention how her marrying well and her choosing to prioritize this not only benefits her, it benefits her whole family. And it gives her freedom to be able to marry well, but it also gives her family freedom, and it gives them more options and stuff, as she talks about when she like talks to Eloise and Anthony. Like, they are all reliant on her doing this. So as much as she wants to do it, she's also aware that she doesn't really have a choice in the same way. And I think it's a bit unfair to Daphne as well, because she's also never tried to push what she wants onto other people. I think the most she said to Eloise was like, you know, keep an open mind. You might like some of these things, but she's also quite understanding when it comes to Eloise. She takes issue when Eloise starts shitting on her because Eloise doesn't believe in like what Daphne wants and therefore doesn't support her, the same way that Hyacinth took issue with it. But otherwise, like in the last episode, she's very happy for Eloise to go read in the library, and she's like, that's fine, then you be you. But yes, in terms of creating freedom for herself, it's also about the autonomy she can bring herself by marrying well. Case in point, Lady Danbury's party, where all the married women assemble and they are able to, you know, make friends and socialize and do these things and build these relationships. And these relationships are ultimately what lead to Daphne being able to track down, what's his name? Not George, it's Sir Philip Crane, Marina's husband. And she helps Marina in that way. Basically, Daphne acknowledges that there is a system and she is trying to do her best within the system, whereas Eloise wants to dismantle the system, but she's doing it wholeheartedly. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, neither of them are perfect. Not that they're going to be perfect, like, humans aren't perfect. Well-written characters shouldn't be perfect. But that's why I think there is so much debate, because you can make the argument either way. There's like a push and pull. But yes, I think I'm done with this interlude, so back to the episode. But yes, I'm very much enjoying being in a Bridgerton era again. I love that there is a new season of the show out for us all to enjoy and have discourse about. I'm also trying to read the books. I am currently reading Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. So this is the Polin book, and this is actually like book 4, and Benedict's book is book 3. So yeah, it's a bit twisty. Okay, here's the thing. I don't know if I particularly enjoy the Bridgerton books, if I'm being perfectly honest. I'll read them, but they're not sucking me in the way I would want them to. I'm not absorbed. I think the Viscount Who Loved Me on a beach holiday, and I read 150 pages on that holiday, and I was only gone for a long weekend. But then when I came back to London, crickets. I barely touched it. I think I touched it again on the next beach holiday I went on. So, like, I just don't think the writing is that great, to be perfectly honest. It's just not my cup of tea, even though I am someone who loves historical fiction, romance, and this should be up my street. I freaking love the TV show, but the books are just not, I can't get with them, but I am trying to also read my way through them. So there's that. But what I will say about the Polin book is that I'm enjoying it honestly more than I think I enjoyed season 3. I can see why book fans were so mad at the writers when it came to season 3, because Polin in their book, like, Colin is an actual yearner. There was not nearly enough Colin yearning in his season. There wasn't nearly enough, like, obviously you can't show their thoughts and stuff. Like, it becomes really difficult in, like, the Hunger Games, for example. It's written in first person. A lot of it relies on Katniss's internal dialogue. When you can't show that in, like, movies and TV shows, it's difficult, and you have to, like, figure out ways around that to be able to show that. They didn't show that nearly enough with Colin, because in Colin's perspective in the book, he is yearning. He is the only kind of, like, he actually has a productive conversation with Penelope about his travel writings and his journal, at which point he starts fancying her. There's a passage where he's supposed to be apologizing to her, and he doesn't get to apologize. He, like, tracks her down at a ball, and he was, like, supposed to apologize to her, and he doesn't get to apologize, so he's kind of miffed about that. But then he's like, I can't really be miffed because I got to hold her hand for 5 minutes. Like, that's so cute. Or how do you leave things like that out? And then, like, every time he gets mad at her about being Lady Whistledown, he can't stay mad at her for long because he just wants to hook up with her. Like, and actually, the fact that they actually have that in-depth conversation about his travel writings and his journal, and she encourages him to publish his work, makes it more poignant later when he realizes that he's actually jealous of her success as Lady Whistledown because it's what he wants. It actually means something. In the show, it doesn't mean anything because they've not had that kind of report about it. Yeah. I'm just enjoying comparing the book and the show. I might go back and reread book 3, the Benedict's book, before the second half of the season comes out in February, but we'll see. Wait, it's February. Okay. Later this month, but we'll see. But yeah, I am enjoying romancing Mr. Bridgerton from that perspective. I saw one of those personal curriculum videos on, like, Instagram, I think, or maybe it was TikTok. I don't know, it was a short form video. And the creator in that was talking about how it was like her first point was that she was going to be reading, but she was going to be balancing fiction with non-fiction. I thought that was a great idea. I am aware that in this, like, book club segment of Vocally Annotated, I'm focusing on non-fiction books. And it just makes me feel like, yeah, it is important to also focus on fiction. Especially, like, publicly, ultimately, this is a platform of sorts, and I don't want to give the impression that non-fiction reading is the only thing worth reading. Although at the same time, that is kind of how I feel. Not because, like, I feel that way, but because I feel this pressure to be that way. I used to read so much when all I cared about was reading fiction, and then once I started having, like, feeling like I had to just knock the mic, sorry, feeling like I had to read non-fiction, then my reading started to go down because, yeah, I mean, even really well written non-fiction is not going to be nearly as gripping as excellently written fiction, at least not that I've come across. Unless it's something like a memoir or autobiography, like Falling Leaves. Falling Leaves was good from that perspective. But yes, back on track. Yes, but I do firmly believe in the importance of fiction. I do enjoy fiction. At the moment, I'm trying to integrate it, so I'm reading Romancing Mr. Bridgerton while I'm still reading Unwell Women, which is the book for the next book club episode, if anyone wants to read along and enjoy. But yeah, so I'm trying to, like, have a balance and strike a nice balance in my own personal reading. I figure if I read something, like a fiction book that I do really want to talk about, I will talk about it here. But otherwise, it's very much for me to balance it. But I also don't want it to be, like, don't get it twisted. I like the idea of having, like, one fiction book and one non-fiction book on the go at the same time. I've also done a decent amount of talking about fiction books on OMG Spill, to be fair, back when it was called Dial Up Book Club, and it was a book podcast. I ran into the same problem there. Well, Kirsten and I did. We ran into the problem where it was like, we want to be able to record more often and publish more episodes, but we can't because fundamentally it just takes time to read books. So I don't know what the workaround is. I read all my books that I've ever talked about. I don't use summaries and stuff. Even before ChatGPT was the thing and you could get those summaries, I don't use those summaries. So it takes time. I don't know what the answer is. Like I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, I guess we've come full circle. I guess we've come full circle. I would like to be able to record more episodes more frequently. It's just a case of, like, not having to rely on my brain for ideas. Like, I'd like to have a format that I can talk about. So if anyone has any ideas, or, you know, if I think of something, then that would be great, because I would love to be in front of the microphone more often. But at the same time, I know that I'm good at the book tangents, the book discussions, and I don't want to give that up. All right. I think that is everything for this episode. In my notes, I have given my thoughts on Romancing Mr. Bridgerton. I have more thoughts on some of the other like characterizations that have been changed and plot points, but the main one that I take issue with is that Colin was a yearner. He should be a yearner, and I do note that the Bridgerton brothers are more distinct in the books, and then by the time they get around to their seasons in the show, they're all like screwing around. I don't get it, but whatever. I'm going to continue to enjoy the show. I'm going to continue to be sat on the days that it releases. I'm going to continue reading the books and see how that goes. I've heard good things about Francesca's book, so I'm hopeful once I get through this one. Actually, I'm saying that like the books aren't very easy to read. I think they would be easy to read if I just skim them. I think if you skim them, you can get through them really quickly. So maybe I should just start doing that. Because a lot of the text I feel like is descriptive and I am getting bogged down in that, but if I skim it, I'm still following the story. I don't know, something I will ponder on. But yeah, thank you very much for listening to this episode. Again, so fun to record. Oh my gosh, love being in front of the mic, and hopefully I'll be back soon for another good old-fashioned yap session, and maybe with a big glass of matcha.